Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Falcon. I am the founder and senior partner of the House of NyghtFalcon. I will be assisted today by J.D. Malazzo, our Chief Operating Officer, and a senior partner in the firm as well. On behalf of DxO Labs in Paris and the House of NyghtFalcon in North Carolina in the USA, I would like to thank you for joining us today. This is an advanced seminar on the use of version 7. We will assume, therefore, that you are somewhat familiar with DxO overall. We also want to make two comments before we actually begin. Number one is we will be using FilmPack extensively in some of the presets that we will be talking about today. FilmPack is an additional module or an additional application that runs within Optics Pro Elite. Most of what we do today you do not necessarily need FilmPack for, but it greatly, from our perspective, enhances the capabilities of Optics Pro. Secondly, most of what you will see today is similar but not necessarily the same on the Mac platform. Questions about the Mac platform will be answered following this presentation on the DxO forum by DxO personnel in the event that we're not able to answer them directly now. Let's begin. This is what version 7 looks like. Note, if you use previous releases of Optics Pro, that there was an additional tab at the end that allowed you to see the before and after. That has been removed. Another significant change in the design of 7 and 7.1 now is that the need to create and save and manage projects has been eliminated. While the database remains in use throughout Optics Pro, all the saving occurs behind the scenes, and effectively, therefore, you don't need to worry about it unless you wish to use projects as a way of organizing your images. And we will talk about that momentarily. Also, the performance of version 7 has been greatly enhanced over previous releases. A significant amount of the code has been enhanced to optimize the performance of the application. We have experienced as much as a 50% improvement in performance on our production PCs. The first thing that we want to look at today is editing preferences. So we're going to go to Edit and Preferences. As you can see, my application language is English. I have Optics Pro set to automatically check for updates. There is a welcome screen, but I typically do not use that. It is extremely helpful for most people. Notice also that I have a very important pair of settings checked here: save settings in sidecar file automatically, and load settings from a sidecar file automatically. A sidecar is essentially a text file that contains all of the modifications that were made to a particular raw image. If you have more than one computer, or if, as is the case with the House of NyghtFalcon, you are in a commercial enterprise that has more than one photographer, having a record of what you did in a sidecar can be a very helpful way of maximizing both the transportability of an image and also your ability to recapture what you did to that image before you processed it or while you were in the process of modifying it or customizing it. So when you have the setting load settings from sidecar file automatically, if you select an image on which we have previously worked, the sidecar images are automatically imported, and therefore all the modifications are left exactly the way they were the last time that you worked on the image. The database can also be moved. Under Windows, this is the default location. Under Application Data or App Data in Windows 7, Roaming, DxO Labs, DxO Optics Pro, and then the storage folder. I also have the ability to control the color of my interface, the default preset for raw images, which I can set to any preset. In this case, we typically leave it to the default DxO. And For RGB images, which is the same as JPEGs, I can also have a default preset applied. Let's look at processing. If you wish to have a suffix added to your file when you process raw images into TIFFs or other formats, you can do so here. You can also override all of these settings in the Process tab, which we will shortly get to. And RGB or JPEG files, JPG is added to the name. Preserve metadata in XMP sidecars for raw images. Again, following up on the use of sidecars, this is a very important way of maintaining and tracking the changes that you make to your images as you work on them. And finally, the number of simultaneously processed images, 2 is recommended, and we have let that stand at 2. It's up to you as to what you want to do with this setting. For us, this works quite well. The machine on which I am doing this demonstration is an ASUS gaming laptop running Windows 7 64-bit Pro. It has a gigabit of DDR5 video RAM, and I am processing a raw image. My camera is a 1D Mark III in approximately 15 seconds. That's a 2-fold increase over version 6. Under display, if I wish to add a grid, you can see that I can do so. ICC profiles, if you generate and use your own ICC profiles, which we sometimes do, you can specify here, or you can use generic RGB or the Adobe. We prefer to leave the ICC profile set to whatever the camera has been configured. I know there was much debate. I leave that debate to you. Our camera is set to sRGB. 2 of the most important features added with version 7 are right here: GPU acceleration and enable OpenCL. Effectively, this allows Optics Pro Elite and Optics Pro to maximize its performance through the use of the graphics accelerator or the graphics processor on your video board, as well as the OpenCL standard, which is emerging within the graphics industry as an important and powerful tool for enhancing the performance of computers. Let's look under Common. My options are display selected image blinking front and back when entering the Customize tab. That would show you the before and after picture if you wish. I have disabled that. 2 is display DxO Optics Module download window when images for which no Optics Pro module is loaded or found. This is tremendously helpful. As soon as you bring in an image that is not supported currently in your configuration, that module is downloaded in real time and implemented, and by the way, it does not require you to restart the application. Display the missing or ambiguous DxO Optics Module dialog box before processing. Again, I have that enabled. I'm assuming at the moment that you're familiar with some of the mathematics and physics underlying this product. If there are questions about that and the effectiveness of having the correct module, please type in a question and we'll address that for you during this presentation. Display the informative dialog box when the processing ends. This basically comes up and says the process is finished. And finally, display the confirmation dialog box when stopping the current processing. That is self-explanatory. There are a number of interesting features here at the bottom of the display window. You may notice that I have checked them all on. You may elect to disable them or put them on mouse over. Processing status, which tells me when an image is being processed. The image name, allow processing, ranking stars, more about that shortly. DxO module status, rotate button, and delete button. I find that the more options I have enabled during the customization, and even before during the selection process, the more effectively and quickly I can process large numbers of images. I'm going to cancel now since I am pleased with the way that my interface is set up. So we are now in the Organize menu. On the left of my screen under Browse, you can very clearly see the directory or folder structure on my data drive. I want to call your attention to two icons. The one that's currently highlighted is File System, and the one to its right is the Project Database. If I switch to the database, you can see here that I've created a number of projects for managing images. Now, after all of the work done to remove projects, why would I want to use them? Well, for us, it's a very simple facet of our workflow, and it comes down to this. In the average day in the field, we are likely to return with approximately 1,500 images. Some of those images may be exterior shots very early in the morning. Some of those may be exterior shot in the evening as the sun is being set. There may be multiple interior images. For example, we recently did a high-tech science building, and that included photographing a large auditorium, laboratories, a clean room, etc. We can effectively create projects, and I'm highlighting the names now, for each one of those groups of images, so that when I'm working on the images shot very early in the morning, I can very quickly apply the same settings to all of them, batch process them, and move on to the next segment of my project. One of the things that I really want to emphasize about Optics Pro is that it is extremely flexible. If I do not wish to use projects, I can accomplish much the same effect organizing my images without the creation of a project. For example, if you look here at the film strip across the bottom of the window, as I move across my images, you'll see that some of them have 5 stars enabled. Others have none. If I essentially lightbox all of my images at this point and decide that all the ones I'm definitely going to process have 5 stars, and by the way, the ability to add all 5 at once is really straightforward, as I just did, I can come here to the filter image, click on it, and eliminate all the ones that do not have 5 stars. And as you can see, the number of images has been reduced significantly. But let's go ahead for the sake of the demonstration and undo that. And you can see all of my images are now back together. Okay, so just to recap quickly, I can create projects at any time. The use of a project functions very much the way that it did in version 4.6. A project, at least according to our workflow, is a very good and effective way of managing large numbers of images, applying settings very quickly, and making sure that I can batch process like images in a similar way. My apologies. Okay, so at this point, you can see that I have a number of images across the bottom of the screen. And I have selected these images because each one presents a very specific problem that we can talk about in the structure of using Optics Pro and Optics Pro Elite as the cornerstone of your methodology for developing your raw images. Let's look at Customize at the moment. Having selected the sample project, and just to make sure that we're on the same page, you can see that it's highlighted. All of the images in that project are here. Notice that at the beginning of the project, I actually have 2 that are identical. One is a virtual copy. We continue to explore the power of virtual copies, and in this case, as you'll see momentarily, I can add a different preset side by side and compare the look and feel of a specific image until I decide which of the presets I've created effectively conveys the emotion and the technical specifications that I want to convey on behalf of my client. I'm going to delete this or remove this from the project very quickly, and I'm going to show you how to create a virtual image. I'm going to select this image again. I'm going to right-click and create virtual copy. You may recall that under version 6, you had to specifically name the virtual copies. That's all now done behind the scenes for you. And there it is. In version 7, the virtual copy uses the same settings as the original image at the time that you create the virtual copy. One of the questions that came up a number of times in the previous 2 webinars was, suppose I apply a number of settings, and I'm just going to quickly apply a preset here. What if I apply a series of settings and I want to very quickly remove them? Or what if I take a preset, apply it, and make all kinds of changes and then want to go back to the original image? Well, the longer way, of course, is to use the undo feature, and you can see here that I've highlighted it. The other way, which we have found most effective within DxO, is to use one of the default presets, which I'm doing now. And the image is brought back to exactly the way it was prior to the application of the preset. Now, let's assume for the moment that most of us are familiar with presets, but let's review a little bit about presets, how they work, how they're created, and why they're important. We never had the luxury of working with film. Everyone here began photography around 2002, when digital cameras were slowly but inexorably supplanting film. What we discovered very quickly was, in the absence of the darkroom, we don't have the same kind of discipline that produces consistent images. We can essentially take any one of the features which are built into Optics Pro, as you can see, and as you probably know. They are extensive and never-ending. Well, over the years, when we've worked with various people to help them understand how to maximize Optics Pro, we've discovered that one of the greatest problems people experience is a lack of consistency. We prefer to do the same thing the same way, much as you would in the darkroom. Presets accomplish the establishment of that kind of a discipline. So I know, for example, that if I apply an HDR preset that was intended for architecture, wherever I apply that, I'm going to get the same consistent look and feel. I also know, and let's assume again for the moment that all of these are going to get the same look and feel. If I do Control-A or Option-A on the Mac, right-click, apply a preset, and I'm going to again randomly select one here. I'm sorry, my mouse is for some reason misbehaving. We're going to slide over now. All of these images now have the same preset. And if I want to enhance my workflow very quickly at this point, I can go directly to Process and start processing, and all these images will be processed. Okay, let's go back to Customize. Let's talk again about presets and creating and establishing presets. The logic behind presets has not changed substantially from earlier versions of Optics Pro. And I'm going to expand the palette here. And you can see, just as before, there are a number of folders which have been created. And if you look for the ones that begin with the letters NF, these are presets that are very specific to the House of NyghtFalcon. We've elected to organize them based upon category. So we have NF color. These are non-HDR based. And you can see that in this case we even have several folders within the folder, one called Casey and one called Catherine. I'm going to apply this one called Catherine version 7 here. Why do we do that? Well, our naming convention is really very simple. NF obviously indicates that it's one that we've developed. The name following the NF tells us the circumstance or condition under which that preset was created. So if I slide over here now, those of you who saw the newsletter saw this photograph. This is Catherine, and these are presets that were specifically created, color presets, to address the problems that I faced with Catherine that day in that shoot. And we're going to talk more about how we design presets momentarily based upon both the technical, artistic requirements. Here's another folder called NF-HDR, and you can see here that all of our HDR presets are listed, and another one for monochrome, and another one for night, and a final one for sepia. So at this point, I can very quickly move through my selections, decide which preset I want, apply it based upon the lighting, the technical, and artistic goals of this particular image. And as you can see, some of these obviously don't work as well, given the problems that we faced on that particular shoot with Catherine. Okay, this is a good place to talk about what those issues were and address some of them. So I'm going to reset this image and let's analyze it together. This image is from 2005, and at that point I was still working in program mode with my camera. This was created with the 1DX Mark II. It was a great camera, and if I had better mastery, I'm sorry, it was a Mark I. If I had better mastery of the camera, I would have been able to take care of some of the technical problems that I see here. Notice, for example, that she is backlit, a notoriously bad problem to deal with to begin with. Notice how thin the coloration is across her forehead, how soft the detail. And in the long term, as good and powerful as this image is emotionally, artistically, and technically, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I created a series of presets, and we'll go back and look at the original one here momentarily in color, that were specifically designed to address those technical and artistic problems that I faced. And you'll see now if I zoom in and change over to the hand tool, the transition across her forehead is much smoother. I've brought out the detail in her hair. Her eyes are more powerful. The lip detail is fantastic. I can even see the bumps in her skin. And as I slide down, I can even see the blood vessel in her shoulders. And there's considerably more detail in the dress. So a very effective way, I'm going to move this up so that I can see a little bit better. A very effective way to correct some of the technical problems, but also to enhance emotionally and artistically the power of this image. So let's review what we've said so far about presets and how to use them and why to use them. Number one, presets bring consistency and repeatability to your workflow. Number two, using presets greatly enhances your ability to process large numbers of images very quickly. Now, that doesn't mean that if we have 100 images of the exterior of a building shot at 6 a.m. that we don't review them all. We do. But we have the ability to very quickly achieve a baseline that becomes normative for all the images that we're working on at that time. Number three, beyond the kind of economy of scale that we've just talked about, understanding how presets work can have an important impact on your ability to deal or to deliver artistically and emotionally powerful images, and to begin to develop a kind of look and feel for your own work that establishes what we call the signature style. And finally, if I apply the same preset, and you're going to see me do that here momentarily, to a similar group of images, I still have the ability to work and modify, customize each one of those images independently of all the others. So, one more thing before we talk about creating a preset. For those of you who have presets from previous versions of DxO, from version 6, we're going to talk about importing them. But before we do, let's briefly talk about exporting selected presets. I have two computers. I have my large desktop quad-core, and I have this i7 core laptop on which I do a lot of my work when I'm on assignment. I want to make sure that I have consistency across all of my platforms. About what, I'm sorry? Okay. I'll come back to that in just a second. I have the ability, if I develop a new preset here, to export it. I put those on a thumb drive or an external hard drive, and then I import them into my desktop so that whatever I have here, and vice versa, I maintain a consistent working environment regardless of the platform on which I'm working. Okay, the question has been asked, tell me more about the laptop on which Falcon is working. This has 8 gigs of system RAM. It is an i7, original generation of the i7 technology, and it is a dual-core processor. The video board is an ATI Radeon Mobile, which was standard with this Asus laptop. Okay, so let's import a preset or show you how it's done. I've already had the luxury of stepping ahead for you to show you where and how to do this. I'm on my C drive, my boot partition. With Windows 7, instead of in Documents and Settings, all of the individual user settings have been moved to a folder called Users on the C drive or on the boot partition. Under Owner, under App Data, under Local, under DxO Labs, under Presets, and in this case, Monochrome. I'm going to move up, and you can see all the ones that have been created or were created in version 7. And at this point, I have the ability of selecting them all, Control A, or selecting only one. By the way, I'm told that on the Mac version, you must import one preset at a time. In the Windows version, I can import an entire folder. I cannot import folders within a folder. But beyond that, it's a very straightforward process. So if at this point I click on on OK and Test, that preset will automatically be imported. Okay. One further comment about presets. I'm going to slide back here to the color. Notice that I have presets that say Botanical Garden no grain, Botanical Garden low contrast saturation in red, Botanical Garden low contrast and saturation, Botanical Garden brown grass. All of those presets share a common core of settings. They have been tailored to very specifically match needs within that set of photos. This was a project that we did for or at the Botanical Gardens in New York City. Therefore, while all the photographs were within the same genre, there were individual instances within the genre in which modifying or changing the look and feel was very important. So much so that we decided to keep those individual presets. Similarly, if you look under Casey, you can see here, and Catherine, those are used so much that we continue to add to the set. Notice too here that after Catherine-V7, a little lock appears. These are locked. There is a setting that I have used to make sure that those do not inadvertently become changed. Okay, let's go back now and work more on creating and using presets to streamline our workflow. All of the photographs that I am now highlighting were created in Copenhagen, Denmark in December of 2007. Each one, as you'll see, has very specific technical problems. And we're going to slide and look through them all, starting with this one. Okay. I'm going to make sure that it's been reset as well so that we can work more through some of the changes that we can make. Okay, so before and after, you're familiar with that. And let's reset all of these at the same time. And as you can see, as I go through each one of these, there are very specific problems that are rather difficult to resolve. That one and the next two were photographed from moving cars at sunset. If you're familiar with Copenhagen, this is the Black Diamond, as it's called, and this is the new opera house from across the river on one of the coldest nights I've ever experienced in the course of my life. Okay, so let's start out by applying very quickly a preset. The one I'm going to use initially is called Red Rock Canyon, which, as the name implies, was used to enhance landscapes in Red Rock Canyon near Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay, now let's take the first one. And as you can see, before and after. Now, let's suppose that I want to enhance this image. I'm going to take my contrast down, and I want to do something to counterbalance some of the other issues. So, for example, let's pull my shadows down a bit and drop the upper end. You can see I'm adding some depth to the image. And let's slide up. My gamma is currently set to 5.99. A bit high here, so I'm going to drop that too. I'm going to pull my shadow radius up. And you can see I'm beginning to get more definition in the clouds. Preserve shadow I'm going to leave. I'm going to pull my global contrast up, and I'm going to enhance my local contrast. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to also take my exposure, which is currently set to minus 0.4, and I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. And you can see I'm beginning to get more drama in the image. And finally, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to switch from a Kodak Portia to a Fuji Superia HG. And let's try one more. That might be a bit more dramatic. There you go. And you can see now how much more powerful that shadow is across the front of the building. And I'm going to add a little bit more to my cyan, up the saturation, and I might shift the hue just a little bit. Okay, so we've gone from that to that. And overall, for the most part, I'm happy with that, and I'm going to keep that, except I want to come down here to lens softness, one of the new features with version 7. I'm going to enhance my bokeh, and I'm going to add a bit of a U-sharp mask here. Generally speaking, I find that the default settings for the U-sharp mask do most of what I want. This is an older preset going back to 4.5, so I'm going to make additional corrections here that are much more germane to the version that I'm currently working on. All right, so now we've gone from that to that. All right, I want to remember this setting because I've got other photographs that I want to apply this to. So what do I do? How do I accomplish that? What's the most effective way to make that work? Well, the first thing I want to do is come to the folder in which I want to put that. So I'm going to put that in NF color since this is not HDR. And if you notice this icon here, create a new preset using the settings of the currently previewed image. And as soon as I do that, my browser opens and I have the name of the new preset, and in keeping with the way that we name our presets, it's going to be NF-Copenhagen, and in this case, because I've used a Fuji Superia Realia, I'm going to add that. And now I save it. Okay, so if we look, I can now apply that, as you see it here. I can now apply that to all the other images in this set in one of two ways. I can either now click on Apply, or I can right-click, apply a preset, go down to NF Color, and apply it the same way. Now, as you'll see for most of these images, it's a bit dark. And as you'll see in the case of the black diamond, that's very easy to fix. I can quickly reset. I can, in this case, say I want to pull up a bit of the blue or change the hue of the blue a little bit. And if I come back down now to hue and saturation and switch to the blue, I can saturate my blues, and if I want to change the hue of the blue, add a more dramatic purple to the look and feel, I can now do that. I can just as easily now go back, click here, which I'm going to do, and I'm going to come down to that preset, and this time I'm going to type in enhanced purple. Very quick, very effective, very easy way to expand the power that presets bring to your ability to very quickly process large numbers of images, and yet to each one bring a very distinctive artistic voice. Now, in point of fact, did I need to create a preset? No, I really didn't. I can just as easily do a right-click, choose Copy My Correction Settings, come to a similar image, right-click, and paste correction settings. And it's that simple. So, is there a hard and fast rule about creating presets, when you should and when you shouldn't? That's largely a function of you and your workflow and what you would like to do and how you want to do it. In our case, as far as I'm concerned, if I am dealing with more than 2 or 3 images, and there's a high likelihood that I'm going to use these settings again, I'm going to create a preset. Why? Because time is critically important. Establishing a very effective baseline to be able to very quickly adapt and change and modify what I've done thus far is critically important. We are a commercial enterprise, and the ability to deliver a consistent product across all the niches in which we work, again, is very important. So for us, the cornerstone of every aspect of our digital workflow is Optics Pro. Now, one other thing, notice when I was here and I right-clicked, all of the options that I have, including ranking and allowing processing. There are more options here than we had in previous editions, which again makes the workflow that much faster. Notice also I have the right-click, add content selection to project. It shows you all the projects that I currently have and more if need be. Typically the way that I work, I begin and organize. I'll go back to that folder. I'm going to make sure that my filter is off so that everything shows up. Notice, by the way, that at this point the icon has turned gray, so that if I wish to add another image at this point, and all of them are probably already in, I simply highlight it, I click, and I drag and drop into whatever folder I wish to put it. The redesign of the user interface, the addition of all of the right-click options, has, in our experience, resulted in a significant improvement in the amount of time that we can use, or that we don't use now, to move images all the way through Optics Pro. And when you couple that with a greatly enhanced performance on the processing, the results are now quite dramatic. Another comment about presets, by the way, notice that up here I've highlighted this image. As has been the case in the past, I can just as easily scroll through, find the preset that I want, and apply it. I did not. Okay. We're going to go back now. We're going to talk about editing presets or changing presets. And this is a good one to work with for several reasons. Notice that the tone curve has been changed. And notice also that the film that I'm using is cross-processed. In this case, let's say that I don't really like this effect in this situation, and I want to modify my preset. I go down to the preset editor, and when I'm in here now, I'm going to highlight any one. I'm going to pick another one here, apply, and go to edit. When I am in edit mode, note the change in the user interface. All of the options now have a colored bar. The ones that are checked can also be unchecked. At this point, everything is included, so if I don't want to include film grain, for example, I just uncheck it. Notice when I made that one change that I have a save button. I also have a cancel button, and I have an apply button. In version 6, this was not the most intuitive process. In version 7, again, greatly enhanced, much more intuitive, much more effective. So that at this point, if I want to get rid of my filter or get rid of my toning, I simply click on Save, which I'm going to do anyway because I'm not going to use FilmPack grain here. It is now saved. The image is regenerated. The edit button is still there, but save and cancel have gone, and now I can, of course, put apply. Very effective way of working on modifying what you've already done. And by the way, I want to call your attention to a feature that we use extensively. Notice over here the EXIF editor is unchecked. Generally speaking, I'm going to check that when I'm editing, and when I do, I'm going to put in my name and my copyright. Let's go back and check that again. And now when I save that, every time I apply that preset, that level of detail is now applied to the image. I'm also going to give you a quick tip here that I've used very effectively to create new presets. There is not a file save as at the moment, but what I can do is I can copy it and insert it. I can also, since I'm very comfortable in the operating system, I'm going to go back to DxO. I can always exit out to the operating system, create a new preset. It will automatically show up within Optics Pro, and at that point edit it at will. So let's review. Create a new preset folder, create a new preset independently of the settings I'm currently using. I can copy a preset, I can delete it, I can import it, I can export it, and I can use my current settings to create a new preset. So let's apply that. Let's go to another image. By the way, a very helpful way in which we often use presets, let's go back to my project. Is to correct very specific problems that I'm likely to encounter with an image. This one, for example, you can very clearly see has tombstoning, and I'm going to quickly apply a preset. This is a new one that we created with the HDR module in Optics Pro based on the Raleigh Retro film, and I'm going to correct the distortion, make this image a bit smaller, move my dock out of the way, and let's choose the right tool. Now, at this point, I'm not going to worry too much about making the building perfectly straight. I'm assuming that you understand this part of Optics Pro. There are several things that I can do. I can right-click, choose copy, and paste it on the virtual image. And as you see, it's identical. I can also, at this point, create a preset that addresses this specific type of visual distortion. I obviously could not get to the ideal position where I should have been when this image was created. From that point on, every time I apply this preset, this effect, including the correction of the distortion, is in fact also applied. Again, a very powerful tool. I want to also draw your attention here. Notice that I am about to add the channel mixer for black and white, and we can get a tremendous degree of customization here by effectively using the channel mixer. You can see I just made the white of the building pop even more. I can pull the red down to get even more powerful and very specific visual effects depending upon what I wish to create emotionally and artistically. And if you haven't played with this particular effect, I'm going to crop the image very quickly here so that you can see what it will do. Okay. Very quickly and very easily add a vignette. For those of you who downloaded the Catherine color over, I'm going to go there very quickly now under the HDR. You may recall that within that folder or within that preset, it did exactly the same thing. Here you go. And you can see here the changes to the vignetting that occurred. Similarly, notice that I used worm tone. If you haven't checked out the additional filters in version 7, please do. They're very powerful. And similarly, under style and toning, there have been some questions that we've received about how we achieve some of the more subtle effects with both film and with filters, and how some of the presets were able to achieve the color over effect. Well, as is the case with everything in DxO, it is highly customizable. And you can see that I've now pulled the intensity of the toning sepia terra down. And it's added a much subtler finish than what was present. And notice also that while I'm still using a cross-processed film, I have decreased its intensity to 27, just to show you what it's like at 100% or so. Okay, so that was the native application of it. Hit undo. That's what the preset did. So we can think about presets as a way of enhancing our ability to deal with a large number of objects very quickly, such that if all of the photographs in one project are the same, as we saw earlier, it's a matter of selecting them all, applying the same preset, and processing them all at the same time. However, as is the case here, we've created a highly specific, very detailed preset that we use in very limited fashion, but which has very high emotional and artistic value for our work. And again, creating and maintaining and supporting an artistic style that enhances your work is very important. So let's go back here. And what I'm doing now is something I frequently do to create new presets. I have left all of my settings exactly the same way, except for the film. And as you can see, I'm increasing the intensity of the film. And I've taken a preset that I use very commonly, very frequently, and I've created on this image a very particular look and feel. Okay, let's shift over now to process. There are some additional options out of the box. Print 12 inches, 6 inches, 800 pixels, 600 pixels, DNG, for those of you who wish to work with DNGs. And as is the case with every option, I have the ability to put it in the same folder as the original image, or I can browse to the folder. We strongly recommend that you save your raw images independently of whatever the output is. From a workflow perspective, we always do everything we can to make sure that our raw images are completely and totally protected. You can allow image resampling, select the pixel count that you wish, the resolution, and it will be automatically resampled. And under advanced options, I can select an ICC profile, which is not applicable in this case. Under interpolation, very much as you would expect in Photoshop, if we slide up and look at the one that we typically use the most, and under advanced options, a custom ICC profile, the original, which is whatever is embedded in the image itself, sRGB or Adobe RGB. Very powerful way of being able to, on the fly, resize and alter the images for a very specific purpose. I'm going to uncheck this at the moment. In terms of actual processing options, it's very much a function of what you want to do. Notice, for example, that if I again select my filter and unselect all the ones that are not 5 stars. I have cut the total number of images down to just those that I wish to process. So at this point, if I click on Start Processing, only this one image that is highlighted will be processed. Control A or Option A in the Mac world, and all the images will now be processed. Or in the Windows world, the Shift key and left click, only those images will be processed. If I go back to here and enable all images showing, Control A, Start Processing, all of them will process. The stats are always helpful for us because they help us keep track of the number of images and the amount of time that we are required to let our machines run independently of when we can work on them. The volume of our work tends to be quite high, so we want to make sure at every step along the way that we have allowed appropriate machine time. Yes. I'm reminded by JD that there are in fact multiple outputs. If I check, for example, JPEG and DNG along with this, I will in fact output 3 different files. One more passing comment. I want to go back in the few minutes that we have left, and I want to talk about mastering monochrome images. And let's pick a different one. I think there is a long-standing assumption that film was in some way objective, and in the digital world, quote, we can manipulate anything. Well, one of the things that we learned very quickly, never having shot film, was that every film had its own very specific color, or black and white, visual properties. They all handled light in a very different way, and therefore color, and therefore contrast. And as you can see here, this is a preset that uses a Fuji Neopan Acros 100. We are extremely pleased with the ability in version 7. I'm going to drop my contrast just a little bit, to enhance an image using the channel mixer for black and white. I would strongly urge you to spend some time becoming familiar with this. You can see that the image is changing slightly as I remove some of the red. I'm going to take some of the yellow out. I can, in fact, also apply filters at this point, and again, we've talked a little bit about that. And you can see the application of a blue filter added contrast to my image. And likewise, at this point, one of my favorite ways to create a sepia. And now, again, you can see that I've taken out the yellow or the overly brown, and I have a very classic, very sharp, early 20th century sepia image. And here at this point, if I wish to drop my gamma a little bit, I can make a very powerful image. So, just to review, beyond the application of a film type, and even in the absence of FilmPack, it's still very possible for you to create very powerful black and white and sepia images within Optics Pro. I would also encourage you to explore, for example, under hue, saturation, and lightness. I could just as easily have found other ways of creating an emotionally powerful black and white image. And you can see here I've changed the emotional tone and the artistic tone of the image simply by working with hue, saturation, and lightness. And similarly, pull it back the other way a little bit, I can accomplish the same kind of additional modifications to the look and feel by working with the channel mixer for black and white, by working with filters. And in the end, I can create a new preset so that the next time I wish to use this to create a similar effect, I can do so. We're coming to the end of our time. I can be reached at info@nyghtfalcon.com, and that's NYGHTFALCON.com. If you have any specific questions, the more technical ones, particularly about the Macintosh platform, are best addressed by DxO. On behalf of DxO Labs in Paris and the House of NyghtFalcon in Greensboro, North Carolina, I'd like to thank you for all your time today, and I would encourage you to apply as much of what we have worked on today to your individual photography studios and experiment and enjoy the power of Optics Pro version 7. So that concludes our presentation today. We will be doing it again at 8 o'clock tonight Eastern Time in the U.S. And I thank you for sharing your afternoon with us.